so you become a musician, you have like an international trip. You have this arc that spans years. When is the first time you started realizing, wait a minute, like I'm not sure how fully I believe these things, or that this is wrong, or that there's something very dark and hateful that I may not want to continue to lead? Was there a particular moment or revelation or relationship?
I think I had doubts from the time I was 14 years old, and that guy came up to me in that alley every day until the day I left 8 years later. But there certainly were some moments that were kind of like trajectory changers. Absolutely. At 19 years old, I got married to another girl, a girl who was 19 years old. We had a child, and then 2 years later, we had another child. So by the time I was 21, I had two kids, and I was a dad and a husband. That helped change me because my wife wasn't involved in the movement, and when I was home, I didn't want to introduce my family to that. She knew, and she begrudgingly went along with it. But I also was a different person at home. So I had kind of a replacement identity, community, and purpose. And that was a massive help. Also around 1995, just before I left the movement, because I was trying to compromise with my wife at the time, she didn't want me on the streets, I decided to open a record shop, so to try and make myself more legitimate. But I was selling racist music that I was importing, music that I was making, but I was also selling hip hop and punk rock and black metal and stuff like that. It was called Chaos Records. So it was pretty evident that we were intent on causing chaos. But the people I met there, they knew who I was. They knew what I was selling, and they were, customers who were black or brown or Jewish or gay, and they treated me like a human being. And although it wasn't their responsibility to do that, and I'm very grateful that they did, though they didn't have to do that. That helped change me. I received compassion from people I didn't even deserve it from, and that was super powerful. It was 75% of my revenue. It was pre-internet, so people were coming in from all over the country, from Canada, to buy it. I was one of the only stores in America that was selling that kind of music. So
75% of your record store revenue was from the white power
racist music.
Like racist music? Wow,
Yeah.
because I thought to myself that you had like a fairly normal record store, and then there were like some people who were getting the stuff like on the the fly on the side. But it sounds like that was most of the revenue. That's insane.
Well, it was probably only 10% of my inventory. I didn't even keep it out in the in the shelves. I kept all the regular stuff out in the shelves, but still the racist music was 75% of my revenue, even though it was only 10% of my inventory.
Yeah, so that was the business then. I mean, clearly it's not like it's a normal record store with like a like a sideline. I mean, it was like essentially a hate music store.
No, it was a hate music store. But then when I pulled that, because I became embarrassed to sell it because of these new people I was becoming friendly with, I pulled that music, and of course I had to close the store because I couldn't even keep the doors open anymore.
Yeah, so that might have been the big decision then, when you if you make the decision to snuff out your business. I mean, you have to know that's happening.
My wife also left me. She left me at that same time. I hit rock bottom is what happened. I closed the store. My wife left me, took the kids. And I used that opportunity in a very sneaky and cowardly way to walk away from the movement. I didn't denounce it. I didn't tell, I told my buddies, I'll be back. I just need to go work on my life. Be back in a few months. I was never planning on going back. It took me about 5 years before I kind of denounced it and faced my past head on. I didn't really start doing that until 1999 or 2000, because I was really trying to run from who I was as fast as I could, until I realized it was killing me to do that.
So in your case, you went to college, I want to say. Is that correct?
Yeah. I left the movement in 96. Took me a couple of years to really figure out who I was. I got kind of depressed. And then in 99, a friend of mine, one of the few friends I had at the time, encouraged me to go apply for a job at IBM. And I thought she was crazy. Here I was, this ex-skinhead full of tattoos. I'd been kicked out of like 6 high schools, one of them twice. I didn't go to college. I didn't even own a computer at the time, Andrew. And she's like, yeah, go apply at IBM. It's a new position that they offered. I'm like, okay, sure. And I went in, and it was an entry-level position. It was setting up and kind of re-imaging all the computers that like a corporation would buy at once. So it'd be like 400 computers, and we'd spend a month, setting that up. And my first job was to install all the hundreds of computers at my old high school, the one I'd gotten kicked out of twice. And they offered me the job, and I took it. It was super entry level. And I was terrified because even though they had no idea about my past, the first day of my first, my job out of the movement was to go set up the computers at my old high school. And I thought I was going to get fired and they'd, destroy my life. And I went. I was terrified. And, moral of the story, IBM eventually sent me to go to college. But moral of the story was I met the man there that day on my first day of work who was the old security guard at my old high school, black man, whose life I had made hell. And he was the one who changed my trajectory. He's the one who, I didn't know what to say to him when I came across him in the hallway. I said, I'm sorry. His name's John Holmes. I said, I'm sorry, Mr. Holmes. And he looked at me kind of scared because I had made his life hell when I had gone to that school. And he said, sorry makes you feel good. It doesn't do a whole lot for me. So I think, you need to repair the damage you've done. And he embraced me. This was a man I'd heard, a black guy who, in my heyday I made his life hell. And he embraced me and he said, I believe in you. And I think you need to tell your story. And that was in 1999. And I started telling my story in roughly January of 2000, 20 years ago. Changed my life. He saved my life. I don't know that I would have made it without him.
Well, it's extraordinarily compassionate of him. Like we all like to hope that we might react similarly to someone who tormented us, but most of us don't have that in us, I don't think. So you're at IBM at this role, and then they say, you know what, you could use some studies. And so they ended up helping you go to DePaul. Is that right?
Yeah. So I started out as this just like computer installer, and then I worked my way up to an assistant researcher or assistant project manager. And then I became an assistant researcher. And then I got hired onto IBM full time, started to lead a team in their SMB, in their small medium business division when the internet was just picking up steam. And through the work that I had done, had started like over 12 quarters, had developed leads that were like $250 million. So at that point, IBM was very happy with my work. I had developed kind of this pioneering research team there in the sales department. So they were like, yeah, we should you need a degree. And I was like, yeah, I would agree with that. So I went and I got my degree as an adult in international relations and international business. And I spent almost, I think, 7 years or almost 8 years at IBM. And I got my degree from DePaul during that time too. And I'm really grateful for that.
Wow, what an arc that must have been. So that takes you through a particular period. And are you in touch with your ex-wife and kids at that time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never lost touch with my ex-wife and my kids. It was difficult with my ex-wife when we went through the divorce, but I always wanted to be a good dad. So I always had the kids every weekend, Friday to Monday as they were growing up. So I never lost that connection with them. And in fact, they're 28 and 26 years old. They're not little boys anymore. So they're doing great. And they saved my life too. I mean, it hadn't been for them to really challenge me and for me to have to be honest with them about who I was. I don't know that I would have made it this far.
So then in 2000, you start telling your story. You're still working for IBM. How did that transition look? Eventually you wound up writing these books, starting these organizations, working in media, trying to get the word out. Was that a big step? I'm sure the first time you started telling people openly about your past, that must have been very, very difficult.
Yeah, I mean, it really took, I told very, very few people, like from 2000 to 2003. It was, I started to talk to family and people that I knew, my wife, who I'm, been married to now for 15 years, I've known for almost 18 or 19 years, who also worked at IBM at the time. It wasn't until 2003 when I went to DePaul that I really started to tell my story. And then in 2004, when my brother was murdered, that's when I really started to do the work that I'm doing now, when I started to focus on trying to help people disengage from hate groups, because I realized at that point that I could have been a better big brother to him. And that now I could probably try and do that with other people that I didn't know that also needed kind of a guiding voice, so to speak.
Well, we're certainly glad that you did, and you ended up writing a memoir that was published in multiple countries, and have become an incredible figure.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening in. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please do subscribe to Yang Speaks and click on notifications so we can let you know every time we have a new episode.